Are recording. All right, all systems go. Hi, everyone. It's Maggieostara here, and I'm delighted to connect with you here today. And as we go along, I want to just encourage you to say hello. Make sure when you go in the chat that you're sending to all attendees as well as panelists. And that way everybody can see your comments and where you're coming in from. So I just want to invite you to put in your name and your where you're coming in from, and then you can add questions in here and so on as we go along, and I'll coming back to them later on. I want to say the same thing for those of you who are joining us on Facebook to go ahead. And actually, one of the things I would love on Facebook if you could hear me and see me, if you can just say yes. Yes, I can see you and hear you. And actually, same thing over here on Zoom, because that just helps me know that we're on track with all of our technology. Okay, so, all right, Facebook folks, I see you there, but I'm not hearing from you, so please do let me know. All right, I'm going to go ahead and dive into our material for today. And always get all worked up getting ready for you every week. So I'm just going to take a big stretch. I'm going to ask you to take a big breath. Move your body around any way that you want to. Yeah, just have a little stretch anywhere that would feel good to you so that you could be more grounded, more in your body. Take another couple big breaths, because we are going to be talking about stress and our stress response today, and what does that have to do with human design and Dr. Joe Dispenza, who is a new hero of mine. Okay, so for those of you who are new to me, whether you're here live or watching the recording later on, I'm Maggieostara, and my two main websites are sovereigntybydesign.com and ostaraexperience.com, and you'll find on both of them that there's a lot of different resources that you can access for free, and then there's also services and courses and all kinds of different things you can participate in if you'd like to get to know me better. And if you'd like to get to know you better through discovering and learning how to live your human design. Today, I am delighted to be doing a solo presentation in our Sovereign Sisters salons. And this is kind of the way these salons are going to roll, is some of them are going to be interviews with luminary women who are also working in the space of sovereignty, feminine sovereignty, and have very vital information and perspectives to share with us that are uplifting and evolutionary, and can help us through this birth canal that we're in here on planet Earth right now, between the old world that is literally crumbling and dropping away around us and the new world that we are longing for and are wanting to bring into being. Whatever version of that is true for you, whatever specific place that you focus your attention on that. And that is actually going to be a big theme for us today. And September is health sovereignty, that's what our topic is. And last week we had Dr. Valencia Ray, who came and presented and talked a lot about stress and different sources of stress that we may not even know about. And next week, I'm happy to have Dr. Abiola Oladoki, who is going to be here speaking about, what's her title exactly, how to use your foundational heritage to reclaim your health sovereignty. She is also a medical doctor, and she has both of them have a list of credentials, and it's like this long. And one of the things that's really cool about what Dr. Abiola does is she works with genetics. And I know a lot of us are very interested in genetics and epigenetics, and how we can turn on and off our gene expression based on our intentions and our energy and our environment and our response to our environment. So we're going to have a really nice set of salons this month where we had Dr. Valencia really setting us out, talking about stress and all of those pieces, and then how human design can help us with that. And then today we're going to be diving deeper into stress and our immune system and how we are wired to respond in certain ways and what we can do about that and where we can find that in our human design, how we can work with that. And then how the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, who's a neuroscientist, can help us to understand, based on his massive research of brain scans, I think it's hundreds, maybe thousands of brain scans, watching how our brains respond to different types of stimuli and what we're actually capable of. And so he's proving scientifically what a lot of our spiritual teachers have been explaining to us for a long time. But it's really great to be seeing science really coming together now with spirituality and with embodiment practices and energetic practices that have been part of the yogic tradition and actually martial arts tradition, lots of different energy traditions in Asia for thousands of years. And so we're going to be diving into that today. Next week is going to be more of genetics with Dr. Abiola. I'm going to come back on September 30th. And we're actually going to be doing practices here together that I have learned. So it's going to be more of a practicum than a lecture, if you will. And I'm excited to be able to provide that to you. And for those of you who maybe didn't get my email, if you're on my email list, you would have heard this story. But I just want to let you know that part of my background, which most of you don't know anything about because I don't share it very often, is that I've really been pretty heavily involved in the field of natural medicine for over 25 years now. And I am not a medical professional. I am not an MD. I am not giving medical advice. And I'm not even a trained, naturopath or Chinese medicine doctor or anything like that. I am a trained and certified microbiota counselor, which I haven't done for a long time. But back in the 90s, when I first was certified, I did do both counseling, microbiota counseling for people. I did cooking for people with cancer, and I also taught cooking classes and lifestyle classes and so on. And that was actually during the transition from when I was leaving my job as a professor and director of women's and gender studies at Columbia into my new life. And I was still in New York, but I took a 2-year program in 9 months, which is my typical overachieving way of doing things. And then I started counseling people, and I was looking for what was my way out of being in the academy, because it really wasn't suiting me anymore, and I was really drawn to that. And I had the good fortune of being introduced to Dr. Marsha Wolf, who is a woman for whom I will always have a lot of gratitude. She changed the course of my life as well as helped me deeply heal my physiology. I had been to my MD a number of times and I had really good insurance when I was at Columbia, and I went to like the best doctors in New York, right? And they did all these tests, and she kept saying, no, you're fine. There's nothing off in your tests. You just need to eat less salt or something like that. It was like, and I just thought, this is not true. I hadn't been introduced to natural medicine then. I mean, I kind of heard about it, but I had no real experience. And I just knew that I was not healthy. Something was going on in my body, and I didn't know what it was. And I got a recommendation to go see Dr. Marsha, and she still is the best acupuncturist I've ever been to. Really, really potent, effective acupuncture. And she also gave me access to Tibetan herbs. She had worked with a Tibetan doctor who was formerly a doctor to the Dalai Lama, and so I was able to receive these little tiny hard brown pills that you chewed up, and they had this really strong herbal taste, and they had been made by and prayed over these Tibetan monks in Dharamsala in India. And I mean, how much luckier could I get than that? And between the macrobiotic diet that I went on and the herbs and the acupuncture and changes that I made in my lifestyle, I dramatically changed my physiology over the next about 5 years. And so I, am a big believer that really kind of changed me. And ever since then, my go-to is much more natural medicine than allopathic or Western medicine. And I have learned a tremendous amount through reading, through practicing, through talking with people, my own self-study, my gate 48, which is the gate of wisdom, just loves to learn. So I've learned a lot. So I have that, I'm really steeped in that. And so there are things that I want to be able to provide to you, including perspectives and the way that our spirituality dovetails with our physiology, I think is absolutely vital. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But I wanted to share that little bit with you about my background, so that it's not just completely coming out of left field. Okay, great. So, all right. All right. So I'm just going to take a sip of water. And I can see a bunch of you are here on Zoom, so I'm just going to invite you to say hello and say hello, where you're coming in from, your name, your human design type, and of course, add questions in there as you want to as we go along. All right, so basically, I've got 3 different things or areas I want to dive into with you today. I actually don't have a slide presentation. For a variety of reasons. but I just really want to share from my heart and my mind and my body and my soul with you today. And I'm going to ask you to, just kind of put things aside. I know how easy it is to multitask, and to have different notifications coming in, and having your phone going off or whatever. So I'm just going to invite you to turn those off if you're willing to, and if you can, and to really kind of take in what I'm saying, because my guess is that some of the things I'm going to share with you today you will have heard before in some format or other. And the question is, have you actually taken that information and turned it into understanding? Information becomes understanding when we add experience to it. We actually begin to utilize that information. Then we take information and we add more, or we take understanding and add even more experience with it. And that turns into knowledge. And then when we take knowledge and add even more experience, that turns into wisdom. And so there's a kind of developmental process that we go through in order to become wise about something. And just getting information about it does not make you wise at all. It doesn't actually mean that that information meant anything to you. If you haven't coupled it with experience and actually integrating it and doing something different in your life than you did before, then it's just information. It's data. It actually doesn't necessarily have any value to you. It's when you take it and you actually start to make it real in your life that you transform it into understanding and then knowledge and wisdom. And that's how you transform your life. It was when Dr. Marcia was able to tell me exactly what I was eating based on my symptoms that I went, this woman is wise. This woman knows what she's talking about. And I took in the information that she told me and I put it together with experience. I went home and cleaned out my refrigerator and cleaned out my cupboards and brought in entirely new food. And I started eating in a very different way and living in a really different way. And that's how I transformed my physiology and really my whole life, and set myself on the trajectory I've been on for the last 27 years now. So I can just offer that to you, because so often now, especially in this information saturated, oversaturated world that we live in, because we didn't have the internet back then. This was pre-internet. It's easy to just be kind of roving through information, but not applying any of it or making it real in your life. So I want to invite you today to take this in. And if you're a generator or a manifesting generator, see how your sacral responds. And if you're a projector, see how whatever your authority is that responds, how your body responds. Same if you're a reflector. And if you're a manifester, see if you can open yourself to new possibilities. Because I know you tend to just go with what you get, but even manifestors can learn and can grow and evolve by taking in new information. Okay, so let me get started with what I was gonna, with what I've got planned for you today. And I will be, jumping over here and looking at my notes some because I didn't do a presentation, keynote presentation for you. Okay, so last week we had Dr. Valencia Ray come and speak. She was awesome. If you didn't get a chance to be with us live, I do encourage you to go and watch that recording, which is on the Sovereignty by Design business page. In the video section, you have to kind of navigate for it because of the way Facebook has changed its navigation. So you have to dig for it a little bit, but it's there. And so she really talked a lot about how stress can affect your health. And I think that even in allopathic medicine, we're really seeing, many studies and also just a lot of data from clinical experience is showing that stress is really a baseline experience, which is both a mental experience, an emotional experience, a physiological experience, an experience in your nervous system, right, is at the foundation of chronic disease. And maybe not so chronic disease, even more acute disease, when the chronic disease gets to be really undermines the well-being of the physiology. And so we kind of have heard this before, right? I mean, I doubt that that's a new phrase. Have you? Go ahead, put it in the notes here. Have you heard that before? Is that something that you're like, oh yeah, stress is the killer, or stress is the thing that's burning you out the most, and the thing that can really undermine your health. So go ahead and just let me know if that's something that you have heard before. Yeah. Okay. Don't be shy, guys. And Paige, you might want to write to attendees also so people can see. Okay. Um, so yeah, so we've heard this before. It's not a new thing, but what does it really mean? Well, Valencia really built out a few things for you last time. What I want to dive into a little bit more today is the matter of cortisol and what happens in your body when you get kicked into a fight, flight, freeze mode, which again, we've heard a lot about that. And one of the things I want to throw out here too is Alison Armstrong, who is an expert on men in particular, but also on relationships and on women, says that women have also been really conditioned to please. In a time if you feel in danger, depending on what the situation is, if you feel in danger from a more powerful man, one of the things you might do is please. It might not be fight, flight, or play dead, freeze. It could be, how do I please this danger? So that's something for us women to think about, and for us men to see if that's resonates for you. Okay, so cortisol is a necessary hormone. It's actually vital. It's the hormone that helps us to engage with life. It's the get up and go kind of energy. And my kid, who many of you know, has had Lyme and 3 other co-infections and has chronic fatigue now. Sam's getting much better, but has been sick for quite a while. And one of the things that we discovered when we did a hormone testing with Sam is that Sam had no cortisol. And I was like, oh my goodness, no wonder Sam's got chronic fatigue. No wonder Sam is having a hard time getting up and engaging with life. And I realized I kept saying, you need to learn how to engage with life. And when I saw that, I was like, you can't, because you don't have any cortisol. So one of the things that we've been doing is helping Sam's endocrine system to rebalance so that Sam will have more cortisol. And I'm seeing just behaviorally that Sam is having more. So that does happen for some people. When you have chronic fatigue, I've had other friends for whom this is true. So if you are in that range, you might be in a cortisol imbalance and not having enough of it. And the reason that you don't have enough of it is usually you've used too much of it in the past. So this is what can happen when you either you get really excited, but also if you have a shock or if you feel that you're in danger. is that your adrenal glands will they'll flood your system with adrenaline, so that you can respond to the danger, right? And then that feeling of adrenaline, right? It's like, whoosh, it's almost like you become a super being when you have it. I mean, you literally do, because when that fight, flight, freeze kicks in, physiologically, what happens is all other functions become secondary. So you're able to you can breathe more, you become stronger, your pupils dilate so that you can see, you do get kind of a tunnel vision, because you're focusing on whatever that is, and your body will react faster than your conscious mind can think. And that is why you can jump out of the way of a speeding train or a speeding car, or why you can pick up a car off of a kid or somebody if it's rolled over on top of them, right? You do become kind of a super being in that moment, which is something that's really cool about our physiology. And it's meant to be used at times when you are actually really in danger. So if, for example, given the situations that have been happening in our lives lately, if you are really running from a fire, which people in Oregon in particular have done recently, but in other places as well, or if you have been running in response to a hurricane, which was happening to people in the middle of the country, or if you were peacefully protesting and all of a sudden either outside influences come in and start being violent, or the police or hired militia or whatever, the ICE come in and start, throwing tear gas and rubber bullets and all of the violence that has been perpetrated against peaceful protesters, then yes, you want that response, and you want to be able to get away from whatever that danger is. That is what that response is for, and thank goodness that we have it. But the other thing that happens when that's going on and you've got all this cortisol and is that, for example, your digestion basically stops because it's like, no, we don't have energy for digestion, right? We don't have energy for a lot of other physiological responses because we have to put all resources into that. So it's meant to happen for a short period of time, right? Because we're not super beings of that nature all the time. Like, we don't have the capacity for it. We're not built that way. We're built for it to be for short periods of time. So what happens when we start to live in a state where that becomes, some aspect of that becomes our new normal? Right? Now, we probably heard about this before, right? Because we think about our stressful society and how we are working with all kinds of new energies, whether that's Wi-Fi and electricity and all that kind of thing, right? So there's the sort of toxicity of the energetic pollution that we're dealing with, or if we're thinking about what's happening with, with the way that the sun has changed, or if we're thinking about having a 24/7 society where we now have the internet and we can literally be working around the clock, 7 days a week, or the pressures that we have from just making a living and meeting the rising costs of so many things in our lives, right? All of those things can produce stress in us, and the environmental factors. So Valencia talked about some of those things. And so if we realize that we have a lot of stressors that are not of the nature of the fires or the hurricanes or the rubber bullets, right? Or the speeding car, the speeding train, but lots of other ones. And as it turns out, just as an example, if you're watching a video on Facebook or YouTube or wherever of those things happening, like the fires or somebody being beat up or George Floyd being murdered or whatever it is, right? If you actually watch those things happening, your physiology can respond just like you were there, like you were that person, right? Like you were there. And so imagine if you do that every day. Well, on the one hand, you start to become a little immune to it, like in the sense of, because your body eventually has to figure out how to deal with shock after shock after shock, right? And you kind of, but it's still happening and it's still affecting your physiology. So this is one of the things. So there's that example where we're looking at, really, truly dangerous situations. But think about the movies that you watch, right? The apocalyptic movies that you watch, or the superheroes movies that you watch, and the violence that is going on in those. And again, on some level, your physiology can be responding. So we've kind of, and I asked Valencia this question last week because I said, well, don't we get kind of addicted to that dopamine, that adrenaline? And she's like, yes, we actually do. And so we become addicted and we lose track of how our physiology is responding to these things. And we actually start to crave it a bit because it is our energy. Because if you do that too much, what happens is you super fatigue your adrenals. And this is why we have so much adrenal burnout, right? Adrenal fatigue. It's an epidemic. And so what happens is you kind of go on craving that because it's a little bit of stimulation. Oh, I don't have my cup here. And if you have a cup of coffee to go with it, right, or some alcohol, which is also stimulating, then you're getting that little boost. But you can see how there's a really negative response in your physiology when you do that. So so the thing is that your subconscious doesn't really know the difference between when you're experiencing some of these things live and when you're watching them, particularly depending on how emotionally involved with this. Now, there's that piece, but then there's this other thing that happens, which is that your survival strategies, which are also lodged deep in your subconscious, which is all throughout your body, your survival strategies, your survival mechanisms can get activated from earlier in your life and also from in your epigenetics, which is your gene expression, and also from what you bring in with you from other lives, to the degree that you believe in that. I believe in it because I've worked with people for so many years and experienced myself the ways that I've connected with other lives, and ways that people have continued to carry trauma in their bodies from other lives. And it's in my work as a breath worker. So that's totally real for me. So I invite you to just uh, entertain possibilities, believe nothing, if you will, with that. But so we've got all of these survival mechanisms that are deeply embedded in our bodies. And you can imagine if you have ones from your ancestral tradition, if you were a person of color growing up in this country, in your ancestral lineage, you're going to have violence, right? If you're a white person growing up in this country, you have experienced and probably perpetrated violence of different sorts. And so all of us, and if you just keep going back through the history of humanity, there's a lot of violence, let's face it, right? And so we've got resonances of that in our bodies. And so we have survival mechanisms that get activated when we feel like we're in danger. And this is, part of the work that I've done for a couple of decades now with clients, which is to be able to bring those survival mechanisms to the surface and really take a look at the ones that have been activated and go, is that still serving me? Because some of them do. Right? Some of them are still good, but many of them are old and outdated and no longer functioning. I mean, not no longer functioning, no longer functional. They're still functioning because they're an old tape that's still happening. So, for example, just to take a really simple thing that happens, let's say you're a little girl and your father gets angry at you when you're like 3 years old and yells at you and spanks you. Okay. Or he could be more abusive, but even just something like that. And this sensitive little girl, especially if you have the gate 19 defined in your chart, decides that men are dangerous. And that's something that she has embeds in her physiology. And she may decide, oh, I need to please him. Like I was saying, Alison Armstrong suggests that this is one of the ways that women are trained, right? and she's displeased her father, and so he's angry and he's being violent, and so now she learns she has to please him, or she learns how to freeze. She might learn to fight back, she might learn to flee. Chances of her fighting back at age 3 is pretty small, but some little toddlers are pretty, feisty. Anyway, my point is that she develops this survival mechanism. And so let's say 30 years later, 40 years later, a situation comes up and she sees a man who's angry, and she can have that same physiological response that she had, and she can be, men are dangerous, and she can go into a fight or flight patterning, or play dead or please, right? And that's not necessarily functional, because that man might not even be angry at her. He might just be angry about something else. Or he might not even be angry. He might be really frustrated, but he's got intense energy, and she's translating that into anger. And I've had this on the other side, where other people translate my energy into anger, when really I'm actually experiencing a lot of distress and overwhelm, but the energy's intense. So this is where we want to start being able to really look at what's going on when we can find ourselves feeling unsafe. I've been hearing this a lot about people saying, I feel really unsafe. And I go, well, okay, where's the danger? Is it a real and present danger? Or is it a imagined danger? Or is it a danger that you are, based on the data and experience that you have right now, you analyze that situation and you go, this is potentially a danger. Okay, so for example, there are people in my community who have had to evacuate their homes because of the fires. And then they get to look at, and I had a threat of evacuation. I actually got evacuated last year, didn't get evacuated this year. But even, I'll take myself as an example. Last year, I got evacuated because of the fires. And I initially was like, but I looked at where the fires were and was like, the fires are far away. They're like 30 miles from me, okay? And is that a real and present danger? No, it's actually not a real and present danger. But I could tell that people all around me were really freaking out, because their fight or flight got activated, and they acted as if the danger was real and present right here, right now. I ended up being evacuated because my power was off for 5 days, and the air was really crappy around here. So I went somewhere where I had power and the air was better. But my house was never in real or present danger, and neither was I. Now, I know some people might really question that, but my point here that I want to offer you is that when you can be more discerning about real and present danger, you can be calmer in a disaster situation or in a situation like that. To be like, okay, is it actually a real and present danger? Or am I allowing my imagination, which is probably my most powerful faculty, to get wrapped up with the potential danger, and then amplify that, and then I start to project that possibility out into the future as if it were real. And then what happens is my physiology responds to that as if it were real, and it was a real and present danger right here, right now. Then there can be another part of your mind that is actually like, well, no, there isn't a fire right here. So it does know that. But there's another part of your physiology that's still operating as if it were a real and present danger. And it kind of keeps going. And this is how people can get so incredibly fatigued in a situation like we're in right now on the West Coast with these fires and the smoke. So someone who's not even near fires, but gets smoke in their area, right, can start to generate these ideas about apocalypse. I mean, that was flooding Facebook a little while ago, the apocalypse of the red sky. When the truth is, the smoke was way high up in the atmosphere, wasn't at ground level. I was out in it, was not at ground level. It was not a real and present danger. It was way high up. And because it was way high up, it was blocking out the blue light, and that's why everything seemed red. Now, I have to say, it was totally eerie, and it was dark, and it was a big wake-up call, I think. At the same time, it was not a real and present danger. And so we need to be able to make those distinctions and to use our actual faculties to be able to to make an assessment there. So I want to invite you here to just take a moment and write down for yourself about how often do you find yourself compelled to be looking at disasters or apocalyptic narratives, or images or videos and so on. And do you then take that, when you do that, do you translate that specific situation into a larger story and start to feel like it's happening all the time, and it's a kind of all around you? And then what's the response in your body and your emotions, and your thought forms when you get involved in that? I mean, I know when COVID first started, and I had a friend who was really tracking what was going on, and this is long before the lockdown, several weeks before the lockdown, and I was super compelled to be watching the numbers and watching the news about COVID. I mean, it was like I couldn't not do it. I was on watching it all the time until I got to the point the lockdown happened, and I was like, okay, we've got a response. This is where we're at. And I was like, but I needed to kind of forcefully pull myself out of that situation and say, okay, Maggie, you've done your research, you've taken action, you're sheltering in place. This is what you can do for now. Now you can turn your attention elsewhere. But I notice, and it happens every time a fire happens too, because I've got to find out where the fire is and what's happening. But then once I get that information that I need, I pull myself out of it and go elsewhere. So just do that little self-assessment, and kind of see what you come up with. All right. So I'm just going to see what time it is. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about human design and how it relates to this, because human design can be such a great tool for us in this discernment, because we really need to learn how to discern and how to live in the present truth, so that we can be strong. Because the thing is we actually really need to develop a strong nervous system, and to develop a strong capacity to distinguish and to be able to use all of our faculties and not have our faculties co-opted by fear and by media images and that sort of thing. So I'm going to go through some of this information relatively quickly. It's about the spleen. The spleen in human design is the center for instinct and intuition, and for the immune system, and for timeliness. So let's just think about this. Let's unpack this for a minute. So the spleen, if you think about it, it's got instinct, which is related to fear, which is related to our fight, flight, freeze, please response. And it's also our immune system. So if you think about that, wow, how I'm relating to this fear is going to impact my immune system. It's also the traditional center for intuition. The thing I always like to emphasize is there's intuition in many parts of the human design chart. It's not just in the spleen, it's also in the sacral, it's also in the knowing circuit, it's also in the sensing circuit. There's a variety of different places where intuition is in the chart. But in traditional human design, we tend to, focus it in the spleen. But the intuition that's in the spleen can be co-opted by fear. It doesn't have to be, but it can be, because it's an instinctual intuition. And so we want to really be able to grab a hold of that and see, am I in actual clear intuition, which means I'm plugged into super consciousness and I have this clarity of mind, I have discernment, I know what's actually true? Or am I being hijacked by my instinct, which is telling me there's a real and present danger when in fact there isn't? Okay, so let me just go through some of the gates of the spleen center, and you can see if you relate to any of this. Okay, so oh, and I just want to remind you that I did go through all of the spleen and all of the gates in the spleen center in previous webinars, which are available to you in the Sovereignty by Design Facebook group, not on the business page, but in the Facebook group. So if you're not a part of that group already, you just need to request access, and we'll let you in. Or if you're already there, you can go in there, and they're often in the webinars on resiliency. Okay, so the gate 48, so all of the, just remember, we all have the spleen center and we all have all of the gates in our chart, okay? We don't necessarily have them defined, and the definition is if it's colored in, it means it's defined, which means you have ongoing, ready, reliable access to that energy and a consistent, even fixed way of utilizing that. Which means if you have one of these defined and the sphere, you resonate with the sphere, it means it's pretty consistent, even fixed. You still can change it. My experience is you can change anything, but you have to work a little harder at it. But if it's not defined in your chart, if it's open, it means you have a variable relationship with this energy, and it'll be a little easier for you to change it and make new decisions about how you want to experience it. Okay, so the gate 48 includes the fear of inadequacy, because the gate 48 is all about knowledge and wisdom. And so people who have that really like to know a lot. And so the fear is of being inadequate, of not knowing enough. I didn't research this thoroughly enough. And it can really hold you back from taking action because you have this belief that you need to know more before you can do something. The gate 57, which is often known as the gate of intuition, has the fear of the future in it. And so it is about this projecting into the future, as I was just saying, the fear of the instinct and projecting that into the future and then being afraid of that. The gate 18, which is the gate of correction or recalibration, has the fear of not getting right or not the fear of being incorrect, right? It's like I need things to be correct. I need things to be lined up. I need to know it's a logical part of the logic circuit. So it really wants to know that. And so if you have a fear of pick perfectionists live here, fear of imperfection. But I think of it as being incorrect, like it's incorrect or it's not getting it right. And this can also lead you to the need to be right, if you know that you have the need to be right, because a lot of people have that. The gate 28, which is the gate, traditionally the gate of struggle, and we're also now calling it the gate of opportunity, and even the gate of adventure when you are leaning into the higher expression of it. But the fear that goes with this has to do with that things are just going to be too hard. It's just everything's going to be a struggle, and it's just going to be too hard. So you can see if that you resonate with that. And then the gate 44. Now this one is really important because this is the fear of the past and of patterns repeating themselves. So I think of people living here in Northern California, where a lot of California, where we've had fires the last 5 years. And so we have the fear of this pattern repeating itself. And it is based on some evidence. I mean, it's based on some experience. It's like not just coming out of nowhere. And so we can have that fear. The thing is that we can then take that fear and amplify it and project it into the future and make it as if it were a real and present danger when in fact it's not. So we want to look out for that. And what can happen in the survival mechanisms is we mine the past for traumas that we experienced in the past. Okay, so it's gate 44. And then when we use the 57 to project it into the future, and then we have fear about that. So you really want to look about that and be discerning about where you are with that habit. The gate 50, which is all about nurturing and taking care of the tribe, can be fear of failing your responsibility, not being there for people when they need you, not being there for the things that the tribe needs. And then the good old 32, which is the fear of failure. So just look at any of those and kind of feel into them and see if they're getting activated for you, because you want to be able to move through them. Chances are like 95% of the time, they're not real fears, or it's not a real and present danger. It's something that a survival mechanism or habit is going for you. And it could be, like I said, from your ancestral traditions, right? Might not even be from something you experienced in this life. Could be from something that happened when you were a little kid. Could be something that happened in another life that you experienced. And so you want to be doing the work of getting clear about that. Okay, I'm going to come back to human design in a minute, but I want to talk a little bit about some potent information and practices from Joe Dispenza's work. And so I'm going to take a breath, take a sip. Yeah, I'd love to hear from any of you how this is landing for you, either on Facebook or on Zoom. Yeah, does this resonate for you? Are any of the just put this in here. Yeah, even just talking about this stuff can really get you kind of activated. Okay. All right. I do want to make sure that we have some time for questions at the end, if you have some. All right. So first of all, I want to say I'm definitely not an expert on the work of Joe Dispenza, but I deeply resonate with what I do know of his work, and I love the way that he is using science as a neuroscientist to back up what many of us have been teaching and practicing for a long time, and certainly that have been present in the yogic traditions and in many of the energy traditions, Ayurvedic traditions and so on, from Asia. And so he's studied hundreds, maybe even thousands of brain scans, and has done lots and lots of work with all kinds of people about how stimuli both inside and outside change our physiology. Okay. And I find that fascinating, right? So he's really looking at changes on the inner landscape based on what we've been learning. And he's proven the power of our thoughts and our emotions to change our physiology and to dramatically affect what happens in our lives. And so it dovetails really beautifully with, like I said, with these ancient teachings and also with human design in a really profound way. So in human design, 92% of us are designed to respond or to be recognized or to work with the flow of life. And even the manifestors, who are the other 8%, are also designed to work with the flow of life. Okay, we're not designed to be these autonomous human beings that are disconnected from everything else. Okay, in human design, we recognize the interconnectedness of all beings and all things, and that yes, we do have an individuality, and in that individuality we develop our personal sovereignty through having command over our inner landscape. But that doesn't mean that we're alone in that. We're actually constantly co-creating with the evolutionary flow of life, with God or with spirit or with the universe or the all that is, or whatever you want to think about it, right? We're constantly creating with this larger energy that is flowing through and to us and informing us and animating us. And we are individual expressions, centers of consciousness within that larger creative force. And as such, we have immense creative power. And so human design recognizes that, and it recognizes that we're in this dynamic relationship with, I often talk about my upstairs team, right? So these are guides and angels and bodhisattvas that I work with. I have Lakshmi over here, a giant tapestry of Lakshmi. I have Taras at my altar. I mean, I have, angels in my paintings. I've got all kinds of connections that I have with non-physical energies that are here to support us. And then I also just use like my sacral on a regular basis to know, okay, I'm moving forward correctly. And so human design gives us the tools we need to know how to tap into that. And I'm not going to go into that a lot today. I talk about that lots of other places where you can check it out. But But the thing that Dispenza really talks about, and you can find him on YouTube, he's got lots of videos on there, and he's got some meditations you can just do. But he really addresses that in our meditation, we need to use the power of our imagination and our emotions to both release the old, outdated patterning that we have, and also to imagine the positive future that we desire. And this is probably not a new concept for a lot of you, but what's different about it for me is that we're really tapping into the larger flow of life that we have. We're not just going, oh, I want a Ferrari and stick it on my um, my dream board, and then it's going to come true, right? It's a much more energetic and emotional and spiritual, connecting with spirit. That's what I mean by spiritual. You can be any religious background. Every religious tradition has a tradition of meditative process and of prayer involved. So you can call it whatever you want, but it's this connection with the all that is, and holding the experience of what it is that we desire. And it is a law of quantum physics that if we have that vision and we hold it long enough and we give enough energy to it, that it will collapse out of the infinite quantum field into form what that vision is. The question is always just a matter of time. How long will it take? I was on I had an interview on Blog Talk Radio yesterday where one of the things I pointed out is we need to remember that everything that we have in our current environment. And if I just take those of us who are, comfortable, I'll just say in the United States or in Western culture, and I'll say, those of us who have a home, right, where we have heat and we have a stove and we have a refrigerator and we have electricity and we have lights and all of that was imagined by our ancestors. They may not have known exactly what it was going to look like or anything like that, but they imagined having a home that was safe and warm and had light in the wintertime. And we get to benefit. It may not have come into form in their lifetime, but we get to benefit. So that's the thing. It's just a matter of time. So we don't know if some of the visions we have for the world that we really want to live in, that is sustainable, that is equitable, where every child has enough food and has a safe place to sleep, and has loving caregivers. Right, as an example, like that is a positive future that I am giving energy to, where no child has to worry about being sold into sex trafficking, right? Which unfortunately happens more than any of us like to think about, right? If we can really put our attention on that and keep doing it, will I see it in my lifetime? I don't know. But what I do know is it makes me feel really good. It helps me feel more energized about how I can take inspired action. It helps open me up to the downloads that I get from the way I'm plugged into super consciousness through my human design. And it changes my physiology to be more empowered, to be really engaged with my life. It does do that for me. Will I live to see the day when that's true for every child on the earth? I don't know. I'm actually not even going to say, because the part of me wants to say, no, I don't think so. But you know what? I don't want to put that kind of limitation on it. But what I do know is that if I'm doing that and you're doing that and all of us are doing that, it's helping to energize that vision in the quantum field, which will then fall into form at some point in time. And this is what Joe Dispenza's teachings help us with, and his research shows is possible. So I'm going to invite you to go check him out and get one of his meditations and try that if you want. And then let me just say, yeah, because we're coming to the top of the hour soon. On September 30th, which is the next time I'll be doing one of these on my own, we'll be doing some practices around this, we'll be doing some practices to help us to release some of that fear, to calm down the cortisol, to be able to, what did I make a note about this? To relieve stress, move out of your autonomic nervous system, to slow the cortisol and return to a relaxed and resourced state. And then from there, just being able to put energy into the environment and the future that you want to be living in, whether that's a future of tomorrow or a future of a month from now or a year from now or 10 years or 20 years or in your next lifetime. So we'll be doing that kind of work together when we come together then. I do want to make one note before we turn it over to see, if you have questions. I'd love to, now is the time to be putting questions in, comments, things that you got from today. I always love to hear about what resonates for you. And if there's some takeaway that you have that you're going to use and move forward in your life with. Okay, great. But a couple things I want to say to you is, there are some things that our physiology knows how to do that we have been conditioned out of doing. So one is crying. I had a conversation with a friend of mine. Oh, I guess it was just last night. We were talking about how good crying is and how much better we feel when we have a big cry. And we've been so trained out of crying. And I'm like, it's one of the wisdom of our bodies to know that we need to cry. We release oxytocin when we cry. We release stress when we cry. We're able to just allow that emotional energy to move. And so crying is one. Shaking is another one. Right? Shaking is another one. And there are both more informal practices of shaking. There's more formal ones like Tray, which is a particular modality that you can learn where you learn how to shake in a particular way. So movement, like people don't hardly move anymore. Like I have got to move, things like continuum movement can be really helpful for us. So we're going to go a bit more into that when we on the 30th. Okay, so I'm going to take a stretch. And yeah, please make any comments that you have. We're coming right up to the top of the hour. So I would love to hear from you. Okay, don't be shy. Jump on in, wherever you are. All right, let's see here. All right, so Shayna says, I don't know if it's Shayna or Shauna, I think it's Shayna, says that this is very relevant to me. I have a defined spleen with gates 58, 58, 57, 57, 18, 28, and 48. So yeah, so then you've got a whole bunch of gates that are defined in your chart. So one of the things you want to do, Shayna, is just go through each one of those and also look at the awakened aspect of them, and be looking at, okay, how often am I here and how often am I there? And do I have a tendency to keep going to the fear place? Do I have a little bit of a knee-jerk response over there? Or am I am I more often in the awakened? Every once in a while that gets activated. And then what can I do to be, if I find that one of the fears is kind of haunts you, because they can, that, what practices can you do to help release that fear when it happens, and then use the power of your imagination to move yourself in a new direction. The good thing about being defined in those places is that once you change it over, it'll stick more in your physiology than for people who are undefined, where it's more malleable and it moves. Yeah, I'd love to hear if that what your experience with that is, if that's helpful. Okay, so Paige is just saying, talking about your recommended supplements. Yeah, so you're just sharing what the things that you're your practitioner recommended to you. Yeah, you know, B vitamins, D3, omega-3s, all of those can be super, super helpful. Absolutely, because we can also affect our physiology by what we're putting in our mouths. We talked about that with Valencia last week. Almost everyone is deficient in D3 and B vitamins and omega-3s. And so, I mean, I know I supplement twice a day with D3 and I'm still, I'm just barely having enough D3. And the fact that we're not outside for all kinds of reasons. I mean, think about it. Humanity used to be outside all the time. I mean, that was the vast majority of time. We're always outside. And now a lot of us aren't. And so that, you know, our physiology hasn't caught up to that change in our lifestyles, which has only been, you know, a couple 150 years old or so. Okay. Let's see. Lorna says, maybe do a quick exercise at the beginning of each session. You know, that's a nice idea, Lorna. Let me know if you have, if you're just saying, oh, and also a number of you are just writing to all panelists, so you each other can't see it. So you might want to change that. Paige, that was true. Lauren, that's true. Nanette, that's true. Most of you. So other people can't see what you're writing. Okay. Yeah, Lauren, are you talking about like doing a little breathing exercise or something like that? We did do a little stretch today, but you're right, I didn't do a lot. Also yelling and screaming. Yes, yelling and screaming into a pillow, ideally. And, you know, another thing you can do is get yourself a wiffle bat. I don't think I have a wiffle bat up here. Yeah, they're downstairs. They're plastic. And you can take them and you can beat things with them. It's really good for anger or frustration. Okay. Paige says, people overreact when I cry in public. Well, you know, so here's the thing. Yeah, they do. Because we've all been conditioned that crying is inappropriate. It's immature, right? And so we really need to look at that. And but we have to see if we're using crying in any manipulative way, even unconsciously. And I do want to have a little caveat here about white women's tears, because this is something that comes up at the end of White Fragility. So this is a little bit of a side note, and I don't want you to think that this means that you shouldn't cry, but there is a way that historically Black people, Black men in particular, have been, what's the right way to say it, subjected to persecution and violence in response to white women's tears. And that's kind of a heavy thing for us white women to kind of take in, but to realize if a white woman, because she thinks a Black man is dangerous just because of his existence, which we've also been really conditioned into believing. It's another whole area for us to unravel our conditioning, is our white supremacy and our white privilege for those of us who are white. And to really look at, have there been times that we've actually participated in that or contributed to that? And that if we are in situations, multiracial situations, and things come up and we feel emotional, we want to remove ourselves and have our cry and then come back. Because what a lot of people of color are saying, and I totally get it, is they don't really want to see our tears. It's like we need to digest our own stuff. So I don't want to say don't do your tears, but just go do your tears with other white people, and don't put that on people of color. Okay. Nanette says, I resonated with the way you explained the spleen gates. I noticed that my husband, college daughter, and myself all have the gate 32, fear of failure. Please expand on that gate and how much more impactful for a family unit. Thank you. Yeah, it's good to see you too, Nanette. Well, expand on that. Well, let's see. Okay, so in the new language, the quantum human design language, which was created by Karen Curry Parker, my mentor and friend, she now calls this gate the gate of endurance. And so the challenge of this gate is to trust in divine timing, to prepare for the next steps of manifestation, and to align with the unfolding of the process, and to be patient. The mastery is the awareness of what needs to be done to make a dream a manifested reality, setting the stage, preparation, being ready. The patience to trust that once the stage is set, the timing will unfold as needed to serve the highest good of all, to translate divine inspiration into readiness. And then the unbalanced expression of the 32 is letting the fear of failure cause you to avoid preparing what you need to do, to not be ready when the timing is right, to push too hard, too fast, or too long against right timing. So it's either one or the other, right? To not prepare and not be ready, or to push because you want it to happen now. And you probably heard the statement that luck is when preparation and opportunity meet, right? When luck is when preparation and opportunity meet. And if you're not prepared, opportunity will come and you won't be able to become lucky, right? I mean, I've been experiencing this a lot lately as more and more opportunities are coming to me, and I'm doing my best to get prepared as fast as I possibly can. Right? So that's the thing, is don't let that fear of failure keep you back from actually preparing. And then not just preparing, but taking action when it's the right moment, right? So that's the thing I would say to you, Nanette, for you and your family, and for you all to be looking at: what's your relationship to preparedness and what's your relationship to timing? Because everything in the spleen is about timing, okay? Because it's all about timing. So look at that and see how the three of you can support each other around being in the more awakened aspect of the 32, and to catch each other and support each other in a loving way when you can tell that one of you is falling back into that fear of failure, rather than going with them and then fueling that fuel of failure as a family, right? So you want to watch that. You don't want to collude with each other, even unconsciously, around your fear of failure. Okay. And then Shayna says, awesome. Thanks for the tips. I noticed the fear response gets activated with males and their intense energy. I personalize and go into free state. Well, yeah. I mean, here's the thing. It's like, let's face it, it's just like everybody, not just women, but women more, I think, as a group, have been brutalized by men, for a very long time. But the truth is, many men have been brutalized by other men too. Okay, so we're coming out of very, very brutal time. The last couple thousand years, in particular, even 5,000 is what people will say, however long it is. It's been a very brutal past. And so we do have this embedded. And so what we need to be doing is healing that, healing that, healing that. And it doesn't mean that there isn't any brutality in the world, because we all know that there is. But how do we become resourced? And how do we become clear and discerning so that we can actually take effective action in the face of brutality? Okay. Otherwise, I tend to spend most time in the higher. Okay, great. That's perfect. All right. So last call for any of you there on Zoom, and then I'm just going to go over here and see what we've got on Facebook. Okay, so Jennifer says, I have good cries a lot, especially with all that's going on in the world. Only have the gate 50 and an open spleen. Yeah, so Jennifer, if you have the gate 50 defined and an open spleen, that means that you're going to feel the 50 the most. And so you would just really want to look at that, and what your relationship is to the energies of the 50. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. And then Elizabeth says, Maggie, today's topics underscore how much I've moved from struggle to opportunity, especially around the spleen gates, 28, 32, 50, and 44. Almost 1 year since we began working together. Yeah, happy anniversary, Elizabeth. I'm glad you're doing well. Move from knowledge to experiencing. Awesome. And that's, of course, always what we want, right? Is they'll take the information and go through that developmental process. So it becomes understanding, knowledge, and wisdom. And that the wisdom, it's wisdom when it's embodied, right? When it's in your cells and you've got it and it becomes automatic. Especially grateful around daily rhythms and wise lifestyle choices. Grateful. Yeah, good idea, Lorna. All right. Excellent, excellent, excellent. All right. Okay, Nanette says, thank you, can so relate. And the three of us have been very deep into the prep for our daughter in her big move to Florida. That is big. We're really on top of this individually and as a family. Thank you so much. However, I have to say that I was not prepared for all this smoke. Well, yeah, none of us were. And then Paige says, my husband and I tend to try too hard to keep our issues to ourselves so as to not trigger each other. Well, on the one hand, is a way of caring for each other, right? But on the other hand, you want to work inside of a couple, of an intimate relationship, whether that's a parent and a child, or lovers, or even housemates, business partners, whatever it is, right? You want to become aware of each other's triggers, and you want to try to be sensitive to their triggers. And you also want to find a way to express yourself and your needs. Also, and you may need to express some of those needs to other people, because if it's really triggering for that other person, maybe it's not going to work so well. But you do want to get your needs met, so you don't want to just bottle yourself up and feel like you can't get your needs met. And on the other hand, we all need to be working on our triggers, and we all need to be working through the energy that arises, and we need to look at what's the learning that we can get. How can we heal our trauma also, so that we don't get so triggered by what the other person does. And one of the things, I don't know anything about your relationship, Paige, but one of the things that couples often don't do, which is really vital in my view, is to actually talk about, how do you do conflict? How can you do conflict in a healthy way? How can you address triggers in a healthy way? What does each of you need in those situations? And not to do it when you're triggered. Do it when you're calm and you're feeling good and things are peaceful, which is often when you don't want to talk about conflict. But it's going to happen. I mean, conflict is normal in relationships in some form. It happens, right? And so you want to be able to talk about it when you're in a quiet space, so that you can come up with an understanding about what's going to make it a safer space for each other, so that it's not actually endangering the relationship or harming yourself or the other person for it to come up. I hope that's helpful to you. All right, dears, I think that's it for today. Many blessings, much love. Like I said, I'll be back next week with Dr. Abiola, and she is a delight, a delight, a delight, a delight. So please share this with your friends, invite them to come on the 30th, when we'll be doing some practices together, and let people know about the Sovereign Sister Salons. I really appreciate your help. If you can repost them on your page, send them to people you think would be interested, that would be really great. That's a way you could support me too. Okay, many blessings, much love. Bye for now.